today. Great. So yeah, for those who I haven't met before, I'm Tara. I'm the research coordinator for the Agroecology Research Collaboration. I'm going to, thanks for joining us today. I'm going to do a bit of a sort of whistle-stop introduction to the Agroecology Research Collaboration and what we do. I feel like people will have different levels of knowledge or have had been involved with collaborating with us to different extents. So sorry if it's information you know, but I'm just going to kind of go over a bit of an overview of what we do. And then we're going to hear from some of the researchers at different stages in their careers who work with agroecological practitioners or have worked with them, to hear a bit about their work and why having good connections between regenerative and agroecological farmers and research is so important. And that's great. People are introducing themselves in the chat. Please do keep doing that. I'll just say quickly as well, there is a Q&A box. If you have questions as we go along, we'll have a time for questions and answers at the end, but please do just you can start putting your questions into that box so that we'll have them ready at the end, and you'll be able to ask questions of myself or any of the panelists. Okay, so yeah, this webinar is just going to kind of introduce the research collaboration and what we do. We're a collaboration of so agroecological practitioner-led organisations. So basically, yeah, membership organisations made up of farmers, growers, and other land-based workers who have a particular focus on regenerative, organic, and agroecological practices. The organisations that make up the collaboration are the Community Supported Agriculture Network, so the CSA network, the Ecological Land Cooperative, the Organic Growers Alliance, the Land Workers Alliance, and Pasture for Life. So all of the organisations are membership organisations covering in total many thousands of agroecological and regenerative farmers across the UK. And we all have slightly different angles that we approach this from. And there is some crossover of membership as well between the different organisations, but we're trying to work together as much as possible to make sure that we're seeing research which is beneficial to our members. In terms of why we formed, all of our organisations really recognise how vital research is when we're trying to bring about truly transformational change in the food and farming system. We're basically trying to do something that hasn't been done before, and we really need research across disciplines as well. We need scientific research, but also economic research, social sciences, looking more at kind of arts and storytelling, across a very wide range of different disciplines. Research is really vital for our work. So that was part of the reason why we formed, was it was important to all of the organisations. One of the things that really drove the formation of the Agroecology Research Collaboration was that we were all receiving really quite unmanageable numbers of requests and inquiries from researchers who wanted to work with us and who wanted to work with our members, which was great. It's really great that people are interested, but some of the research proposals that we were receiving or the queries we were getting weren't really related to research that was actually that useful to the practitioners, or that kind of met the priorities of our members. With quite often, obviously, research ideas are developed within kind of academic spaces and don't necessarily address the questions that are most important to farmers on the ground. So we started this collaboration to kind of bridge that gap. There's clearly so much interest in doing research into agroecology and regenerative agriculture. And so many questions that need answered, and we started the collaboration to just kind of work together to try and make those links between what's happening in academic research and what's happening on the ground. We also see, there's huge amounts of funding that go into agricultural research, and the amount that actually goes into agroecology is very small as well. So trying to shift that as well, if we're doing agricultural research, is that research that's really helping us towards a sustainable and fair transition? The aims of the collaboration from the beginning, I should say we formed in 2021. So, well, we started in 2020, but sort of had our inaugural event in 2021. So we're still quite young, still kind of working out what we're doing, but we've done quite a lot already in the past couple of years. Our aims from the beginning have been to represent and further the research needs of agroecological practitioners across the UK, to develop a network of connections with researchers and research institutes to co-create relevant research that's based on principles of mutual support and exchange, to build a strong evidence base that demonstrates agroecology as a viable and long-term alternative to the current industrial, food and land use system, and to ensure that ARC members and the wider network of grassroots organisations representing those who work in food, farming and forestry are actively involved in and have an equal stance in developing and steering research agendas. So in terms of what we do, there's various kind of different strands of our work. A key thing that we do is bringing together academic researchers and agroecological practitioners, just kind of opening dialogue. And we do this through a mixture of different things. We've had 2 different gatherings, kind of a year apart from each other, where we brought together researchers from different disciplines who are working towards a kind of agroecological future, or working in something, connected to sustainable and regenerative agriculture. We brought them together with some of our members who are particularly keen in research or who have themselves been involved in research. And at these meetings, we've explored some of the questions around power dynamics in research. We've heard from practitioners about their own experience of being researched, and we've worked to kind of develop key questions that are interesting both to academic researchers and to farmers, and to kind of try and find, where avenues for collaboration and working better together could be. We've also had panel discussions at the ORFC for the past 2 years. That's the picture on the right was some of the farmers who are engaged in carrying out their own research did a really great panel discussion 2 years ago, where they presented some of the work that they'd done and why they'd kind of ended up doing research themselves. We're also planning this year to have our first agroecology conference, like agroecology research conference, which will be in the autumn. I'll say a little bit more about it at the end. But we're hoping that will bring together researchers to actually present some of the research they're doing, and that will be a conference which is 50% researchers and 50% farmers, growers and other land-based workers. So hopefully there'll be a really interesting shared dialogue, and we can all learn a lot from each other. And yeah, I'll say a little bit more about that at the end. Another thing that we do is support or collaborate on research projects. So one of the things that we put together is we've put together a guidance booklet for researchers who are going to work with farmers that addresses some of the things about, how best to communicate, what some of the challenges might be, in terms of like setting expectations for what the research will look like, how we make sure that that farmers are kind of like remunerated for their time and their expertise, that kind of thing. And it's got sections that are aimed at people at very different stages of their career, including undergraduate, postgraduate students, as well as people developing kind of like larger research proposals. So you can check that out on our website if you think that would be useful. We've also collaborated on various research projects, including ones looking at local food systems, new entrants to agroecology, and measuring the benefits of polyculture. There's just some examples of the projects that we've partnered on. We've also helped with advising on the development of research projects and funding bids, and I'm always open to chat about these things, and the various organisations that are for members of ARC have been partners, like kind of official partners on various different funding bids. So that's always an option if the research really aligns with the work that we're doing. I also spend quite a lot of time working with postgraduate students to develop their research questions in line with what is interesting for our farmer members. So we've worked with over 150 postgraduate research students so far and got some really, really cool findings out of that work. It's a lot of very exciting work in the field of agroecology going on in kind of early career research circles. Another thing that we do is to support our members to actually carry out their own research themselves, kind of on farm, answering the questions that feel most important to them. And then to try and make links between, that research that's happening on farms and the kind of broader questions being answered in the academic literature. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Izzy now to just speak a little bit more about this.
Hello, I am here. I'm not sure you can see my video, but I am here. But yes, I'll just say a little bit about Experts in Your Field. So Experts in Your Field is a project that began actually last year with a first phase. It's funded by the UKRI, and the ambition of the project is to fund land workers and farmers to be able to make sure that they can do research about subjects that are of interest to them. So phase one brought together 20 farmers and land workers, and they conducted research mostly on soil and also biodiversity. And this phase, which is the second phase, is seeking to engage with much more people than the first phase. So we've got currently about 70 people who are really interested in the project, which is amazing. And we've had some workshops both in Bristol and Glasgow to really drill down into what people want to be focusing on this year. And there's quite a variety. There's definitely a large number of people who still want to focus on soil and biodiversity because they're such important subjects, but they'd like to expand the research into different sort of tests and also different approaches. And there are also people who want to do their own kind of more specific or niche research projects. So there's quite a few people looking at sort of research around sort of technologies or sort of small scale technologies that agroecological practitioners could use. And there's people looking at specific types of livestock, so goats, for example. And so there's some really, really, really exciting subjects. And I think this project really nicely demonstrates what ARC is trying to do more generally in the sense of, supporting grassroots research and sort of development of new practices and policies. And I think it should be a really good project. So get in touch. Feel free to get in touch if you want to learn more about it.
Thanks, Izzy. If you want to maybe post your email address in the chat just in case anyone does want to get in touch, but I'll put something in the follow-up email as well.
I'll do that.
Just kind of last thing for me on the sort of quick rush through all the things that we do at the research collaboration. We've been working recently on piloting a community supported research model, which is something that we have come up with ourselves, so we're interested to see how it works. It's basically a system where academic institutions can become kind of institutional members of ARC and through that support the work that we're doing, which would involve kind of collaborating with us to develop research which addresses the priorities of agroecological and regenerative farmers. It would offer access to farms and farmers from our networks who are interested in research. There's potential for more participatory research. It also involve us, working to disseminate any research that's coming out of these institutions, to make that accessible to our members, to make sure that it can have kind of as much impact as possible. And we can also offer different opportunities for students. Things like we've done some work where my colleague and I will come in and run workshops on farmer participatory research, for example, and can offer kind of one-to-one guidance with research proposals and stuff like that. This is something we're just developing at the moment. I think we have 2 institutions signed up so far, but if it's something that might be of interest to your institution, if you're from an academic perspective, please do get in touch, and we can have a meeting and chat about it further and see how it might develop. It's something we're quite excited about at the moment. I'm gonna stop sharing now and pass over to some of our speakers. At the end, I'll do a bit of a roundup of how to get involved, who to contact, how to join the mailing list, etc. But I'll pass over to our speakers just now. So I'm going to stop sharing and pass over to Michelle. Are you happy to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hello. Thank you very much, Tara, and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you to the organizers for inviting me. So my name is Michel Pimbert. I created 14 years ago the Center for Agroecology, Water and Resilience at Coventry University. And that's a transdisciplinary group that works quite a lot with farmer movements, including the Land Workers Alliance and Via Campesina chapters, as well as social and natural scientists, all on the theme of transforming food and agricultural systems for more social and environmental justice, if I could put it that way. So I'm delighted to be here. I think I have 10 minutes, and I was asked to offer some reflections on the benefits of practitioner-centered and practitioner-led research collaborations. And I just want to make a few points really to complement Tara's really comprehensive presentation. The first is that there really are many examples of citizen and farmer-led research and knowledge co-creation that actually take place outside of universities and agricultural research institutes. And that happens on the living campuses of farmers' fields, watersheds, their workshops, villages, and municipalities. And we've heard over time of many examples like Campesino a Campesino in Latin America, but also in France, Réseau Semences Paysannes, the Farmer Seed Network, and L'Atelier Paysan, which is similar to Farm Hack. And they're all developing place-specific solutions to technical and institutional problems and needs. But I'd like to stress upfront that it's important to distinguish two approaches to collaborative agroecological research, and they're not necessarily mutually exclusive, far from it. One, an approach that emphasizes self-managed research and grassroots co-creation of knowledge, and the other one which engages in much more participatory power equalizing research with universities and public research institutes. Now, in terms of benefits of these collaborations, for me, three stand out, and I'm sure we'll hear from other people. But one is that these agroecological research collaborations really try and respond to needs that are not usually addressed by formal research. Many farmers who want to grow their crops and rear their animals using agroecological approaches or biodynamic approaches or permaculture approaches, they clearly need very different technical knowledge than what's currently provided by the dominant agricultural research system, which really focuses massively on the delivery of pesticides, growth hormones, food additives, and other external inputs marketed by corporations. So we have a huge lack of knowledge on things like evolutionary plant breeding, quite critical at a time of climate change, bioindicators for soil health, for soil fertility management, etc. The second big benefit is that these decentralized and widely distributed networks of farmer citizen-led research produce many practical solutions tailored to site-specific conditions with a fairly high level of accuracy and reliability. It's interesting that in the UK, one of the longest biological data sets on the relations between weather patterns and the phenologies of plants and animals has been actually established and maintained by a decentralized network of amateur gardeners and citizen scientists, quote unquote, and this from the 18th century, from 1736 till now. And interestingly, meteorologists today, so meteorological scientists today, use these long-term data sets generated by these people's initiatives in their own modeling. So high degrees of accuracy, high quality and validity recognized by different parts of the scientific community, but by no means all. And the final observation is that, and real benefit to me, is that these collaborative forms of knowledge co-creation around agroecology, sustainable food systems, allow for much more inclusive and participatory decision-making in knowledge production and its validation. So the question is, if we recognize these benefits and accept them, how can we enhance and further deepen these benefits? And that's the question I ask myself. So if we look at the first strand, the strand of self-managed research and grassroots innovations, this process doesn't happen in a haphazard way. It's not random. There are different elements that are mutually reinforcing, which come together. And some of them have been identified, one being a big emphasis on conscious raising, critical education for practical and political knowledge. Another one, emphasis on peer-to-peer learning and building horizontal networks along which ideas, tools, techniques, systems travel. A third, an emphasis on dialogues of wisdoms between different generations, between different genders, but also with that intercultural dialogues between holders of different knowledge systems. And fourth, a process that really tries to strengthen local organizations and networks they form. Now those interacting parts really define the beginnings of an alternative research system, quite different from what happens in the halls of universities and establishment research. The second approach, well, the implication there is that going forward, there's a need to build and consolidate and sustain and scale out these alternative grassroots networks for self-managed R&D in agroecology. I think that's a very important priority going forward, and strategizing around that is quite key. The second area of benefits is when interactions with public sector scientists become fruitful and generative of valuable knowledge for different places and contexts in which farmers are making a livelihood or trying to make a livelihood. And essentially here, that part of the scientific community does emphasize much more power equalizing forms of participatory research. A great deal of attention given to how do you put in place non-extractive forms of research and relationships with farmers. The power relations are very asymmetrical, but there are a number of safeguards that we know are very effective. And I won't list them all, but I'll mention, the valuing of people's knowledge and agency as an act of empathy, respect, and solidarity. Free prior informed consent and negotiated agreements around the terms of engagement between farmers and researchers, the creation of safe spaces for non-extractive participatory research, language justice, embracing cognitive justice, having extended peer communities of scientists and farmers actually co-validating knowledge in situ, and adopting a very iterative process, a participatory process of action, reflection, and planning. And with that, a very, very strong social commitment to strengthening grassroots R&D systems for territorial food system transformation. So advancing these two complementary approaches to the production of agroecological knowledge is very important. They require different tactics, different alliances, but there is scope to do much there. But at the same time, I think it's very important to be mindful of the larger context for these kinds of agroecological collaborations. The benefits of farmer-led research collaborations are heavily influenced, and the outcomes are heavily influenced by the larger context and factors that impact on local, national levels. There are both enabling and disabling factors that impact on the potential benefits of farmer-led agroecological collaborations. And there has been some collective work in the center I was involved in to identify some of these factors. One immediate constraint, which has already been mentioned by Tara, is the issue of funding. The lion's share of research and development funding supports industrial food and farming. In the UK, only 1.4% of domestic agricultural research budgets funds agroecological practices and knowledge creation. UK overseas aid development barely supports agroecology. Less than 0.5% of the total UK aid budget since 2010 has been used to support agroecology in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And this is a worldwide picture. There's a chronic lack of investment in research for agroecology, both domestically and overseas. So the need to increase funds and find approaches, strategies to increase funds is definitely a priority. But with that, there's a need to fundamentally transform the ways of working and knowledge produced in universities and research institutes. So by this, I mean all kinds of professional reorientation to get scientists to learn to work with farmers in a respectful way, taking into account gender and decolonizing knowledge. So training in gender sensitive and decolonial participatory research. And with that, organizational change, including rethinking rewards and incentives for scientists if you want them to work differently. So redirecting substantial public funds for the decentralized and distributed co-creation of knowledge by peasant farmers and consumer citizens is also key for widespread agroecological change. The second major constraint I want to mention, and I won't mention them more, but I think it's important at this point in time, given the degree of discontent in the farming world, and we're seeing this in all kinds of demonstrations all over the world. The second major constraint to realizing the full benefits of agroecological research collaborations is really the lack of time and lack of material security of farmers. And this applies especially to new entrants to farming. Farmers, like any others, need enough material security to survive. There's a need to find ways of reversing the economic genocide of farmers today. For example, by reorienting subsidies away from large industrial systems to support small and medium-sized farms, as well as new entrants to farming. I mean, can you imagine a recent World Bank report, 2023, estimates that a subsidy equivalent to $1 million per minute, $1 million per minute, supports industrial food and farming responsible for much of global climate change, biodiversity loss, forest destruction, and pollution. With that idea of protecting the material security of farmers is the whole idea of safeguarding, protecting local economies from dumping of cheap food and unfair competition. The question of free time to engage in research is very real, and I was talking about this at the Oxford Real Farming Conference at one of the seminars that looked at possibilities to create time and security for young farmers in particular. You really need free time to engage in research on the farm and share findings with your peers, as well as develop large horizontal networks for grassroots self-managed research. And also collaborations with formal sector scientists. And you also need time and enough material security to participate in policy making and institutional choices that affect research at local, national, and global levels. So free time to learn and practice the art of participatory democracy for research, but also for agroecological transformation more generally. So do I have any proposals here? Well, I think there are some interesting proposals on the table, and they could be connected more with initiatives that seek to promote agroecological research collaborations. The first idea is simply and importantly, introducing an unconditional citizen income for all genders, ages, and ethnic groups without any means testing. Another one which has been discussed quite serious, the reduction in time spent in wage work and a much fairer distribution of wage work between men and women. And in France, networks similar to the Agroecological Research Collaboration have focused on institutional innovations that could actually help farmers and also ensure that the right to food is met. This is the idea of introducing a social security system for food. So we have the NHS, we have social security systems for health, but we could have one for food. And that institutional innovation would ensure the right to healthy food for all, and at the same time provide market outlets and fair prices to small and medium farmers. And in France, they're estimated that 150 euros a week per food eating citizen would provide much more material security and dignified work for hundreds of thousands of farmers and people working along the food chain. Now, I'm going to stop. Yeah, so the point I'm making here is that going forward, the future of agricultural research collaborations will, I believe, depend a great deal on how much we connect these dynamics with broader questions around economic democracy that's needed to make more political democracy possible in setting research priorities, agendas, and general policies for food and agriculture within a food sovereignty framework. I should say that my positionality is very much located in food sovereignty and the right to food. So I'll stop there and apologize if I went over time, and we can come back to some of these points if you wish. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And yeah, thanks for such a detailed overview of some of the challenges that there are to having this kind of collaboration and proposals for how we might address that. I'm going to hand now to Dr. Lisa Norton. Are you happy to introduce yourself, Lisa?
Yeah, can you hear me okay? Yeah. So I'm Lisa Norton. I'm from the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, and I'm based at Lancaster. But I'm an ecologist. So, and I've been working with farmers for a while. I did prepare a talk, but I've decided to go off the cuff and just mention some of the projects I've been involved in. So I've been researching for about 30 years. I've always been interested in farming. My first project was to look at organic versus conventional farming impacts on biodiversity. And it was way back then when I realized you can't just go and look at the farms without actually talking to the farmers and understanding what they're doing and why they're doing it. And so that's when I started to engage with farmers right back from the start of my research career. And I just wanted to mention a few projects which sort of fit with some of the things that Michelle's said very eloquently. And one project was in Loweswater in the Lake District, where there's a real problem with lake pollution. And I met some farmers at a national park meeting who were worried about legislation and the Environment Agency coming down on hard on them. And I came and talked to a social scientist here at the university, and I talked to the farmers, obviously, first and foremost, and said to them that this would be a really interesting thing to look at from sort of ecological and social perspectives. And yeah, we worked back there and really interesting project working with the farmers, looking at their productivity, looking at what the landscape meant for them, but also looking with the whole community in the catchment. And that was a very much, we called it the knowledge collective, which sort of speaks to what Michelle was saying. Actually got a lot of knowledge from the locals there that really helped us shape that project and hopefully do something about long-term lake pollution there. But other projects I want to just mention is the SEEG-SLIP project. It's a horrible acronym with an S and a double E and then a G and then SLIP. And the important bit was the LIP, really, because that's the learning from innovative practitioners. And that was a project that I put together with colleagues and with the Pasture Fed Livestock Association, because I had been speaking to them and I could see that what they were doing was really heading for towards sustainable agroecological solutions. And I just wanted to see if we could evidence that from multiple perspectives. And we got funding, which was fantastic, because as Michelle says, most funding doesn't go in these kind of directions, although I really do think there is an appetite for it. And when I have asked the Research Council why there isn't anywhere near enough funding going in these directions, they tell me they don't get anywhere near enough applications of the kind of thing that I was putting in. So that's an interesting challenge for us. But that was a project where we did manage to provide evidence to the PFLA about productivity and about ecological parameters like soil carbon and biodiversity, etc. And just recently, just going to briefly mention that I've been involved with the mentorship scheme that the PFLA have set up, and they're doing in the farming in protective landscapes, where they're joining up new farmers, and we've been looking at evaluating how those farmers are doing, what they're getting out of it, what their well-being is, what practices they're learning, and that's been really fascinating to be involved in. So I suppose just to say to researchers that I think there really is potential, there is an appetite for this co-created knowledge. It's very much what research councils are looking for, and yes, there still is this huge industry, a research industry with very big players in, but I personally believe that the bottom-up movement can be just as powerful, and and I really hope that we will bring the research councils on board to help provide the kind of information we really need to be giving to farmers about how to farm agroecologically. And we won't just be working to tell farmers what to do, we'll be working with them so that they can advise us, because there is so much we don't know about farming and their need for being economically viable and also being a part of a rural community. So yeah, very much I think of co-creation is the way forward. And I'll stop there, Tara, so that you can keep to schedule.
Great, thank you very much, Lisa, and really lovely to hear some examples from your own research. I'm going to hand now to Nikki Yoxall, who's both a PhD student and a member of the ARC steering board for Pasture for Life.
Thanks, Tara. I'm also dealing with imposter syndrome, being on a panel with people that I cite frequently within my academic writing. So that's always something to get over. But yeah, really lovely to be here. Just to give a bit of detail and context to what Tara just mentioned. So I work with Pasture for Life, heading up their research work. And just as I've mentioned in the chat, PFLA, Pasture Fed Livestock Association, rebranded as Pasture for Life. So if you're thinking, those organizations sound similar, it is one and the same, but we went through a very recent rebrand. So just bear with us while we try and align what we're all calling the organization. And secondly, I am also, well, not secondly, but I am also a PhD student. I graduated from CAT. Great to see some fellow CAT students in the audience today. I did a master's in sustainable food and natural resources, and then I now am a PhD researcher at the Countryside and Community Research Institute, CCRI, and I think Matt was on the call earlier, but maybe wasn't able to stay. So my PhD research is looking at the agroecological transition, and I'm particularly interested in looking at it through a lens of leverage points for sustainability transformation. So building on the work initially kind of done by Dana Meadows back in the 70s, but then the work that has inspired that of David Abson and colleagues to understand the kind of three deep levers for transformation within our food system, which relate to rethinking the way that we learn, reconnecting with nature and restructuring our institutions. And the bit that I'm particularly interested in is reconnecting with nature. And as well as doing those two things, I also run a Pasture for Life certified grazing business as well. So we produce 100% pasture-fed beef. So I occupy this interesting positionality where I have a foot in multiple camps. One is a kind of industrial, if you like, as we get called, research partner at Pasture for Life. Also operating as a researcher within doing my PhD, and also as a farmer. And I think what's really fascinating in occupying that particular interesting positionality is that it's often reflected across many others within agroecology. Many of us don't just wear one hat, and we kind of combine multiple different either income streams or positionalities or approaches to our work. That means that we're very rarely just a grower or just a farmer or just a researcher, and often have interesting kind of links, even if it's on a non-paid basis, into maybe growing and being quite kind of self-sufficient in vegetable growing, for example, or something along those lines. So I do find it really fascinating that many of us operate from within this very mixed positionality. I want to also talk a little bit about the farmers that I feel are quite often forgotten in all of this. And one might be surprised at the cohort that I refer to here, but it's the people who are basically doing the agroecological stuff, but would never talk about themselves as being agroecological, and for whom they maybe don't exist within a political arena that is often reflected by the majority of the agroecological movement. They don't necessarily align themselves with a political left-leaning tendencies. They would definitely never refer to themselves as peasant farmers. And I think within the UK, we have a very interesting kind of space that is really developing, where there are features of agroecology being presented by farmers who would never ever consider themselves agroecological, and they might not even really think about themselves as being regenerative either. So that's something that I'm particularly interested in, is working with and understanding what it is that is driving the kind of shift in the transformation by these farmers. Now, I don't want to talk in too much detail because don't want any spoilers for my eventual PhD thesis when it finally gets written. But I think one of the things I've really been interested in is how nature is often considered as a partner or as a team player. We sometimes hear from the likes of the Nature Friendly Farming Network and others operating in this space that nature can be seen as a stakeholder. But actually within my research, what I'm finding is that nature is being presented not as just a stakeholder, but as a partner, as a team player in the transformation. And that's something that I've been really interested in exploring, and how that then relates to system change. What are the triggers that support farmers to start thinking about nature? And I'm using the term nature purposefully as something that many of us recognize, but actually many of the farmers I talk to also don't necessarily think of nature as nature, but hopefully you'll know what I'm talking about when I use that word. And actually the notice that they then give to ecosystem processes, to ecological functioning, that allows them to reconsider their farming practice. And this kind of slightly alternative view of agroecology, which is in itself an alternative and often defined by its alterity, is something that I'm finding particularly fascinating. And yes, this space where often that which is being modelled, for example, so through Pasture for Life, we're working, and actually Lisa's involved in as well, a project called Pathways, which is a Horizon funded project looking at the different pathways for livestock systems in Europe. And within that, there is a lot of modelling happening using data from a number of years ago that is informing these modelling programs and these systems that are used to kind of define what could a future look like. How many cattle would we have? How many sheep? Where are they going to be? How much land do we need? All of which is being informed by grazing management, for example, that doesn't necessarily reflect the reality for many farmers. And Lisa's probably rolling her eyes because she has to listen to me bang on about this all the time. But I think that's something that's really fascinating, that the progress of farmers far exceeds the progress of the research. So not only do we have challenges around accessing finance, and any of you who have been involved in Innovate UK will know that they only really like you if you've got a product to sell at the end of something. So even though it's meant to be farmer-led, it's farmer-led, but with something to sell. And often many of us within the agroecological movement are looking to reduce, for example, inputs rather than create new ones. So there are some challenges there around the expectations set by Innovate UK, but also challenges around the data sets that are available to us don't reflect the reality of what's going on farm. And for those of us that are straddling these multiple kind of roles, this is something that we're seeing all too frequently, and it is incredibly frustrating, because I think farmers definitely are moving, as I said, ahead and much quicker than research partners can catch up with, either due to a lack of funding or a lack of awareness of on-farm practices. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to stop. Tara's come back onto video, which means that I'm talking more than I should be. So I will pause there, and hopefully there'll be some interesting questions coming through.
No, that was perfect timing, Nikki. Thank you. We've got 10 minutes till the end. If people would like to share questions, there's a little Q&A box at the bottom. We'll start with, there's some people have quite specific questions for individual panelists, perhaps. We'll start with questions that are kind of more generally about the research collaboration and how we work with researchers, and about collaborative research with practitioners more generally, and then we'll go to some more specific questions if we have a moment. Well, if people give people a second to put their any questions in the chat, I'm just going to I'm going to share my last slide now about how to get involved in ARC, just in case the questions run over a bit and people have to dash off. That's my doorbell, but I'll ignore it. So in terms of how to get involved, there's obviously really different ways of how to get involved depending on who you are and what kind of work you want to do with us. If institutions can become an institutional member as part of our community supported research project. Individual researchers or research groups can partner with us and our members on research proposals, carrying out research. I'm happy to chat with people about who are developing their kind of postgraduate research plans, things like that, so get in touch with me. I think worth saying that the next month I'm actually traveling for conferences, so if I'm not super fast at replying to emails, it's not because I'm not interested. It's great to chat to people about the research they're developing. If you have joined us from a farming background, a farming perspective, and you're really interested in taking part in research and being kind of put in touch with researchers who are working on things that are interesting to you, then please get in touch about that. We can kind of add you to our list of farms who are particularly keen to take part in research, or if you're interested in being in the Experts in Your Field project, get in touch with Izzy, who was talking earlier. Please do join us for our first Agroecology Research Conference in the autumn. I'm sorry I don't have more details to share about this yet, but they will be coming in the next couple of months, and I'm certainly very excited about it. I think it's going to be a great opportunity to kind of share with each other some of the really quite amazing research that's happening and the progress that's been made across the UK. And in order to kind of have updates on what we're doing and how to, access the recordings of webinars and how to sign up to the conference and everything like that, please do sign up to our newsletter, and I'll put the link for that in the chat just now. Now we'll go to the questions. That's the oh, sorry, didn't share it with everyone. That's the link to join the mailing list for the research collaboration. We only send seasonal newsletters, so you'll only get 4 a year. Your inbox won't be overloaded. But a bit of an update on what we're doing.
Tara, do you want us to jump in and answer some of the questions in the Q&A? Would that be handy?
Yeah, that would be great. I think they're fairly specific, some of the questions, rather than kind of more general questions about the collaboration. So yeah, just if there's one that feels particularly specific to you, then go for it.
I don't mind jumping in relation to both Anonymous and Lawrence's questions about training and traineeships potentially available, just because that's kind of something I have been involved in for the last few years. Originally at LWA and now within Pasture for Life, there is actually the development of a regenerative livestock training program that is going to be launched this year. So I guess it depends for both of you. I mean, Lawrence, you talked about agroforestry and sustainable agriculture, and the anonymous person hasn't really identified what type of farming they're particularly interested in. But as I said, Pasture for Life is launching this summer. I think it's going to be about June time, a regenerative livestock program in Scotland. There is also an agroecological traineeship program that has been developed by the Land Workers Alliance. So I would recommend getting in touch with the LWA directly if you're interested in learning. There are a number of places such as Henbant, which is in Wales, who offer internships. And I would also really recommend, if you're particularly interested in livestock, then becoming a member of Pasture for Life is going to be a sensible thing to do, because then you'll have access to all of the members who are often happy to host if you just want to go for a couple of weeks or a longer term. Like if you just want a little taster, or if you want to get work, then there's definitely going to be people available who'd be able to help you. And again, the broader Agroecology Research Collaboration members will all have links into members who might be interested in hosting. So yeah, Tara shared at the beginning all of the members of ARC, and probably the best thing to do is to contact their kind of info at, if you like, email addresses, and they'll be able to share with members. But becoming a member of organizations that you're interested in, who are working in that space, is a really, really good way to connect with others. And then sometimes those just going on farm walks or visits or events is where you then spark opportunities for those, whether it's work experience placements or internships or traineeships. That's probably going to be your best option. I would recommend connecting with people to get opportunities rather than trying to look for things that are too formalized as a first step. And I would also really recommend knowing your worth. I get very frustrated about unpaid internships, and I would really, really recommend, if you're looking to gain experience, then value yourself and don't work for free, and make sure that you are that your time and your input is valued, and that you're getting paid for that beyond being able to stay in a caravan free of charge, for example. You can tell this hits a nerve with me. It's something that I do get quite frustrated about.
Great, thank you, Nikki. That was in answer to the questions: can you recommend any schemes or traineeships that can help entrants gain practical experience while completing a master's level dissertation? And I'm a master's student with particular interest in agroforestry and sustainable agriculture. What kind of work is available for a graduate in this area, and what does a route into it tend to look like? So thanks, Nikki, for that. We'll go to a kind of broader question now. I'm going to open it up to any of you. Perhaps Lisa or Michelle, you'd like to come in. Would payment by results as a basis for incentivizing environmental land management schemes in England lead to more farmers becoming much more knowledgeable and much more sympathetic to the needs of wildlife, with which they share their farming space? Would any of you?
I have got a view on this. So I think they have been very interesting as a trial, and I think there are certain areas, like they've worked very well in the Burren, which is very biodiverse and species rich, and there's been a lot of guidance, a lot of investment in guidance and training for those farmers. I think it needs all that, otherwise you're expecting a lot more of farmers. They already have a job and it's quite a time-consuming job. So I am slightly concerned that they are not really a very viable route going forward for many farmers. If they're going to be done in very biodiverse areas, then there needs to be significant investment in training for those farmers. And yes, they will definitely become more sympathetic to the needs of the wildlife with which they share the farming, but they need to be remunerated accordingly, because quite a lot of their time will be spent looking after those things. So as long as they're getting an agri-environment payment for looking after that wildlife, I think that's feasible. But I actually think for most farmers, they don't have the time to be doing it at the level at which it would actually be really valuable. So
I
tricky.
can just jump in and actually, yeah, add to what Lisa said. In Scotland, we've had piloting of outcomes-based approaches in Scotland through Nature Scot, and it's been really interesting. I think the biggest concerns of farmers are that you can't control. We like boundaries as people. We're good at drawing maps, and not being able to control what happens, for example, on your neighbour's land, which might then have implications for you, was something that just came through quite strongly. And actually, also the outcomes still tend to be quite prescriptive, even though we're trying to move away, for example, in that piloting approach, away from prescriptions to looking at the outcomes. Ultimately, the outcomes then become prescriptive, and it's then very difficult to kind of be clear on, actually, well, we didn't get the outcome we might have been managing for, but we got these other outcomes that were really great and actually are possibly more valuable to a wider audience. And that was something that came back through the phase 1 reflections on that work that yeah, definitely needs some further tweaking.
Great, thanks very much. The other question we have is, what is your opinion on the Wales Sustainable Farming Scheme? And perhaps if anyone feels qualified to answer this, they could kind of think about it as well in terms of its impact on agroecological innovation, for example. Is anyone?
I don't know it well enough, so I certainly don't feel qualified.
So what was the question, Tara? The Wales?
What's your opinion on the Welsh Sustainable Farming Scheme? So the new sustainable farming scheme that's coming in, and I think if we want to expand that to make it sort of specifically relevant to this discussion, how do we think that will impact on agroecological innovation in Wales?
I haven't worked in Wales for a long time, and I'm not familiar with the scheme. I would just say that I'll make some assumptions. Presumably there's talk about agroecological approach in this sustainable intensification scheme proposed. And it's probably quite important to look critically at what kind of agroecology is proposed. Because there is this big debate around, you know, a more transformative agroecology that centers justice in food systems, as well as environmental ecological sustainability, and forms of co-opted agroecology that essentially try to fit the practices as well as the research into a much more conforming pathway of agricultural development, which is essentially business as usual. Very often when I come across the word intensification and scratch the surface, this is what it means. So I just caution about that, but like Lisa, I have not studied this particular policy in detail. But I suspect that would be one important strand. Say what kind of agroecology for whom and with what consequences. Yeah.
Thanks, Michelle. That's a really interesting insight into the kind of what to consider when evaluating these sort of schemes. I think my sort of take on that one, my kind of a key concern from what I know of the scheme is that it's very much an area-based payment scheme. So the people with the most land will continue to get the most money. And we see a lot of the really exciting innovation in regenerative practices, agroecological practices happening at kind of smaller and kind of medium-sized scales. Although there's also amazing innovation at large scales too. But that a system which is purely area-based might not support everybody. And that could really hold us back in terms of innovation. But I'm feeling my knowledge of the schemes is much more like Nikki, much more Scotland focused. So I'm not sure. We've got one more question. I realize we've gone over time, so totally understand if you have to leave us, but hopefully you can stay for last question. This is from Ollie Thompson. It's for Lisa or for anyone else on the panel who wants interested to answer it. I wondered if there's any research collaboration on the impact of nutrient pollution in groundwater supply. My project is also looking at the Shropshire groundwater scheme.
Not that I'm aware of, not in terms of groundwater. That sounds really interesting. So yeah, sorry about that. I don't know of any others.
Okay. Thank you everyone for your questions, and thanks for joining us. Please get in touch if you have any other questions that you want to ask. And thank you so much to our panel, to Professor Michelle Pimbert, Dr. Lisa Norton, Nikki Oxtel. And yeah, thank you all for joining us, and hope to see you at some of our events and at our conference in the autumn. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Tara, and your colleagues for organising this, and great to meet you, Lisa and Nikki, who I saw at the Oxford Real Farming Conference, and which I very much enjoyed your talk, Nikki. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, that's made my day. Thank you so much.
So you should shed the imposter syndrome completely.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. Okay, I have to go. They're really nice to meet you both. Thank you.
Thanks,
See
everyone.
you.
Thanks, folks.
See you.
Take care.
Bye. Bye.